All right, welcome to 8B, which is simplifying rational functions with multiplication and division. So let's get started. So number one, we have all monomial numerators and denominators. So at this point, we don't have to factor anything. Everything is actually factored for you. Now we look to simplify. So we look at each individual numerator. 3, is there a denominator that can simplify with it? No. The 2, the 4 can simplify with it, not the 7, but the 4. So that's 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. All right, next we look at the x. Is there an x in the denominator? Yes, there is. It's x squared. So you can kind of think of this as x divided by x squared, which you can actually rewrite it as x times x, and there'll be an x left in the denominator. We don't have to worry about the numerator at this point. So x squared divided by x is really x. X divided by x is 1, or you can leave it blank if you would like, because there's other terms left in the numerator. At this point, we cleared everything in the numerator, checked it with the denominator. We do 3 times 1 times 1 is 3 in the numerator. 2 times x times 7, use the commutative property of multiplication to multiply 2 times 7, which is 14, then there's x, and there's your final answer. Number 2. All right, all monomials again. So let's look at our numerators. We have a 2 in the numerator. It can be reduced with the 6 or the 10, not both, 6 or 10. So I'll just, 2 divided by 2 is 1, 6 divided by 2 is 3. We now have an n in the numerator and an n in the denominator. N divided by n is 1. So we're going to have times 1 times 1. We have a 3 in the numerator. 3/10 doesn't reduce, but 3 over 3 does reduce. 3 over 3 is really 1, or 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now looking at our numerators, we have 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. If you don't write those 1s up there, it looks like there's nothing there, and there always is a 1 left over in the numerator, and that's why, because like anything divided by itself is 1. 1 times 1 times 10 is 10, and there's your final answer, 1/10. Number 3, all right. We don't have all monomials in numerators and denominators. Now we need to factor. Oh, factoring is fun. Look at your first numerator. And is there a greatest common factor? Yes, there is. It's 6. Divide each term by 6. And so the greatest common factor is 6. So that's multiplied on the outside. What's left is 30 divided by 6 is 5. I'm going to rewrite this on as our next step. Kind of write them above. 1, looking at that, nothing I can simplify there. That is not the pen, Mr. Johnson. Times 1. Looking at your next denominator, 3n. It's a monomial, so we're not going to simplify anything there, or factor, factor. And then looking at your n plus 5. N plus 5, that's a linear binomial. Is there a greatest common factor? Nope. So that is it. There's nothing to factor there. All right, now everything's factored. The next step is to look at every factor in the numerator and compare it to the denominator, see if we can reduce anything. So we look at the monomial 6. That's a monomial factor, and there's a monomial factor 3 in the denominator. So 6 over 3 can reduce to divide them both by 3 to 2 over 1. We have an n plus 5 in the numerator. That is a binomial. You have to have binomials have to be identical to simplify them. N plus 5 over n plus 5. That will be n plus 5 divided by n plus 5 is really 1. And then we only have 1 left in the numerator. That is not going to be able to reduce by anything. So our final answer is 2 times 1 times 1 is 2. 1 times n times 1 is n. There's your final answer, 2 over n. Number 4. Let's factor. Factoring is fun. We have, looking at your first numerator, is there a greatest common factor? Yep. 4k. And so we do first term divided by 4k is k. 20 divided by 4k is 5. So 4k, k plus 5. 4k is a factor and k plus 5 is a factor. The denominator, it's a monomial. No need to factor it. Already factored for you. It's 4 times k. Second fraction, second rational expression here is the numerator is 4. That's a monomial, nothing to factor there. Last fraction, the denominator is k squared minus 25. This is a difference of squares. Square root to first term, square root to second term, and there's a subtraction in the middle. The answer, the factor is going to be k plus 5 and k minus 5. One way to look at it, otherwise you could look at it as it's a quadratic and a is 1. So you do what two numbers multiply to c, which is negative 25. That will add up to b, and b is 0. And that's positive 5 and negative 5. That's another way you can look at that if you didn't notice it was a difference of squares. All right, so there's our factors. So now I'm just totally concentrated on what's over on the right here. And I'm looking at 4 as a factor. Is there 4 in the denominator? Yep, or something like 8, 6, something that can reduce with it, and there sure is. 4 divided by 4 is 1. It's the same thing divided by itself. We then also have, right next to it, this k, that monomial, and there's a k in the denominator of the monomial. K divided by k is also 1. Just got to remember these are multiplications in between. The next factor is k plus 5, and there is a k plus 5 in the denominator. So we have k plus 5 divided by k plus 5 is really 1. And lastly, we have another 4. Is there a 4 in the denominator left? Nope. So that is going to stay there. So in the numerator, we have 1 times 1 times 1 times 4 is 4. The denominator, we have 1 times 1 times 1 times k minus 5 is k minus 5. And there's your final answer. 5. Factor the numerator and denominator of each. We have biggest common factor of the first numerator is 3. Divide first term by 3, you get 5k. Divide the second term by 3, you get 9. The denominator, greatest common factor is 2. Divide the first term by 2, you get 2, or k. Divide the second term by 2, you get 3. Next, we have the k squared minus 2k minus 3. The a is 1, so it's what two numbers multiplied to c, the negative 3, that add up to b. And that would be negative 3 and positive 1. And to get k squared with binomials is k minus 3 and k plus 3. Lastly, we have, we could have just canceled those out right away, simplified them, but I didn't, so we'll just keep moving on. 15k minus 27, greatest common factor is 3. 5k minus 3, let me rewrite everything we have here. 3 times 5k minus 9 over 2 times k minus 3 times k minus 3 times k plus 1 over 3 times 5k minus 9. Like I said, you could have simplified those 3 and the 3, or the 15k minus 27 and 15k minus 27. Could have done that right away. We look, we had a 3 and 3. Those simplify. The k, 5k minus 9, 5k minus 9. Those are really all ones. I should keep writing those. We have a k minus 3 divided by k minus 3. That's really 1. That is all that's left. So looking at the numerator, we have 1 times 1 times 1 times k plus 1 is k plus 1. The denominator is 2 times 1 times 1 times 1 is 2. That's your final answer. Number 6. So the first term here, that is written kind of backwards of what we're used to. So I will actually rewrite it. The negative 8v, and 24 is positive, so plus 24. So make sure you keep, I'm going to write the v's first. And then greatest common factor is 8, but we got to be careful. This first term is negative, and we're not used to having the first term negative ever. The term with the variable never is negative. So what you do is you take the greatest common factor and you divide it out. Divide by -8, divide by -8, you get v minus 3. Then on our next denominator, we have 24 is your greatest common factor. Divide each by 24. The numerator, your second, is the greatest common factor is 21. And then denominator, we have a is 1, so what two numbers multiply to 24 that add up to -11, and that is -8 and -3. B and 3. Let's rewrite what we have so we can kind of make some sense of it. First numerator, first denominator. Second numerator and second denominator. Oh my goodness. And we'll see what's in the numerators and denominators that we can simplify. We have v minus 3 and v minus 3, that's 1 over 1. V plus 1 divided by v plus 1 is really 1, same thing divided by itself. Let's reduce -8 over 24, divide both by -8, or by 8, sorry, by 8. And then 21 over 3, we can reduce those. 21 divided by 3 is 7, 3 divided by 3 is 1. That is it. Let's rewrite what we got. -1 times 1 times 7 times 1 is -7. Denominator, we have 1 times v minus 8 times 1 is v minus 8. There's your final answer. And that is it for division, or multiplication, and then we'll do division